Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Today I'm going to be covering the best Eldritch Knight build in Baldur's Gate in my opinion. This is one of the most requested builds since I started doing build guides, and so I'm very happy to bring it to you. And I haven't yet posted a build for Lae'zel. I think this is a really excellent one that will fit her character very well. She'll end up with some spells, which of course you can flavor as her natural Githyanki psionic abilities, so it fits the character extremely well, I think. This build is going to end up with a ton of tanking, very high damage output, and a decent amount of utility at higher levels, especially for a party, and I think is also one of the most powerful builds for soloing the game. If you want a character to solo tactician, this build is one of the best out there. If you are building this for a main character rather than Lae'zel, Githyanki is actually one of the best races for this anyways, so that's another reason to have Lae'zel fill this role, because the Misty Step is so powerful on this character. But as always, the usual suspects of Wood Elf are incredibly strong. I also quite like Dwergar for the natural enlarge, since we're going to be a melee build, and Halfling I think also deserves a mention here, because this is actually one of the best characters in the game at maintaining concentration on a spell. Since we start as fighter, we're going to have Constitution save proficiency and high Constitution, so it will be hard for us to lose concentration on a spell, and the Halfling's Lucky ability can prevent you from losing concentration even on a natural 1, so that's a very powerful synergy for this class as well. But let's take Lae'zel through and build an Eldritch Knight. So first off, as always with the companion characters, the first thing we have to do is fix their stats, and of course these stats are even going to need some additional tweaking because we intend to be casting spells on this character. So let's clear all this and get going. We are going to be taking 16 strength, of course, because we're a fighter, and 16 constitution because we're a fighter. The main difference here is that I'm going to also put a 14 into intelligence to make sure we have good spell access, though of course there are some items that will let us mitigate this. I'll talk about that later on, and you can get some more optimal spreads if you want to perform respecs once you have access to certain items. For our last 4 points, it's less important. You definitely don't want a dexterity penalty, so you have to have at least 10, and personally I like just having the last 2 in dexterity for the initiative bonus, although for a main character you might want to put them in charisma to make your skills a little better, or wisdom because it is a very important saving throw, so either of you moving those 2 points into either of these 2 as well could be useful, but I'm going to assume we're using this stat spread for now. One thing also to note on a Githyanki is they have Astral Knowledge, which lets you gain proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability. So when we're picking our proficiencies, we want to pick one that we're usually going to cast Astral Knowledge on, one skill category, and not take skill proficiencies in that category. So, for example, if we wanted to always use Astral Knowledge on Dexterity, you wouldn't want Lae'zel to come with Acrobatics, because you'd just gain that proficiency anyways, and could instead move that somewhere else. My recommendation is you want to pull everything out of these Wisdom skill proficiencies, because Survival, Perception, especially are quite useful for a character who's not going to be your party face, and just put your skill proficiencies into everything on the fighter list that's not Wisdom, so that you can then activate Astral Knowledge, select Wisdom, and have Perception and Survival proficiencies. The other option I think would be to move Acrobatics and take Dexterity proficiencies, which actually lets Lae'zel do some lockpicking, which is kind of fun. For our fighting style, we are of course going with Great Weapon Fighting for Lae'zel. For a non-Lae'zel character, you could consider taking Dueling instead, or Defense. Both of these are very powerful and would let you use a shield, which is obviously great on all these builds, but Lae'zel gets access to a lot of unique or Githyanki-specific two-handed weapons, and so having her spec'd for two-handed weapons is the way to go for this character, I believe. Alright, let's level up. As we continue to level in Fighter, we get access to Action Surge, the single best ability in the game. Just get a second turn, which is incredible. And then at level 3, we are, of course, selecting Eldritch Knight. Eldritch Knight gains spells and spell slots every 3 levels. So we'll get additional spell progression at 3, 6, 9, and 12 if we were to take Fighter all the way through, so just keep that in mind for what spell level we have access to as we go. For our spell selection, since we only have 14 intelligence, we are not going to want spells that opponents can make saves against. We want spells that buff us or have effects that don't involve saves. Since we'll be attacking a lot, I quite like having True Strike, and then for the other option, I would probably just take either Mage Hand or Minor Illusion. These two are just always incredible, although if you have access to them elsewhere in the party, maybe you want Blade Ward, maybe you want Dancing Lights or Light, something like that, but let's assume that we're taking Minor Illusion here. For these spells, we are effectively selecting some spells that will always be prepared, because these are spells known, and because of what we're doing later in the build, we want to have a heavy focus on Abjuration spells. So I would suggest selecting Shield, which is the whole reason to go into Eldritch Knight in the first place, is you get to both wear heavy armor and have access to the single best defensive reaction in the game in Shield, making you incredibly hard to damage. And then we're actually going to take Protection from Evil and Good. This actually is useful in some fights in the game, but mostly we're taking it just because it's a level 1 Abjuration spell that we can cast whenever we want to, and you'll see why later on. On our expanded spells, we get to pick from any spell, so the Eldritch Knight spell list is only Abjuration and Evocation. On our expanded spell list, we can pick any wizard spell, and I think that the best one here is probably Expeditious Retreat. Gaining bonus action dashes in the early game gives you so much mobility, and as a melee character, you want to be able to get into range of enemies, of course, so Expeditious Retreat is incredibly strong on this character and on any martial character. So that's my recommendation for spell selection. Other options are Enhanced Sleep and Long Strider, though you probably want those from other spellcasters unless you're soloing. And anything else that doesn't have a save, like Fog Cloud, can be very good. Magic Missile gives you a range damage option that doesn't care about your intelligence. Ice Knife actually can be useful to create an ice surface, which enemies will fall on. The deck save is not based on the save for falling prone on the surfaces is not based on your spell DC, so they'll have a chance of falling prone on the ice surface, but I think in general Expeditious Retreat will serve you best. At level 4 we get our first feat, so we are going to be leveling up in strength to make sure that our damage is going well here. And then here we'll take probably just Magic Missile because it's the best of these options. You don't want spells that do damage because typically the ones that require a save. Chromatic Orb is another one that doesn't allow a save, and so, but it has a to-hit roll, which is also based on your intelligence, which will be low, so we want ones that don't have a hit roll, don't have a save, such as Magic Missile. Continue to level up, and at fighter level 5 we get extra attack, which obviously is really good, especially in combination with our action surge, allowing you to attack 4 times in a round. Incredibly powerful. You also get Misty Step from your Githyanki race, which gives you another bonus action repositioning tool, guaranteeing that you'll be able to start a fight in contact with enemies all the time. We're not going to replace any spells, we already made the best spell selections. And then at level 6, we actually gain an additional spell slot. It's not listed anywhere here, but we now are a level 2 spellcaster, which is particularly valuable for this character. So we are going to, of course, being a level 6 fighter, we get an additional feat, which means we get to 20 strength. One advantage of fighters is that they can hit 20 strength earlier than any other martial character at level 6 instead of at level 8, because of the bonus feat. At level 7, though, we're going to switch things up into kind of a wild direction. We are going to go with Wizard. And the reason for this is actually coming next level, but we want to hit at least 6 levels in Fighter so that we can get our additional feat, and then we're going to want 6 levels in Wizard. You could for your additional, because you get the additional spell level at level 5 fighter, you could go 5 fighter and 7 wizard, but 6 and 6 will get you an extra feat, which is quite valuable, so this is the split we're going to go with. For our cantrips, again, we're going to look for things that don't have a saving throw, so something like Blade Ward, Light, and Dancing Lights. And for our spells, similarly, we want utility spells at level 1. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that we are gaining, because we already have 2 spell levels from our Eldritch Knight levels, we're actually a 3rd level spellcaster, so we have level 2 spell slots, even though we're only a level 1 wizard. And so even though we can only select these level 1 spells on level up, you can now learn level 2 spells from scrolls. So which spells you're going to select should also depend on which spell scrolls you've found, since as a wizard you can now learn those spells. For our spell selection, though, we're going to take anything that we don't have access to from our Eldritch Knight levels, but in particular you want stuff like Fog Cloud is very powerful, Longstrider and Enhanced Leap are very powerful. Featherfall can be quite useful for getting into odd locations. And I also quite like having Find Familiar on martial characters because it gives you a flanking buddy. So if you knock someone over, your familiar can do a little damage with advantage. It can just be very useful to pull enemies around the place as well. And of course, scouting gives you a lot of utility. For prepared spells, you take kind of whatever you want, but I recommend having Fog Cloud for sure, because it blinds without a save and can protect you from archers, and then probably just the mobility spells like Longstrider if you don't have access to it from somewhere else, Featherfall. Then, at level 2 Wizard, we get the reason why we're in Wizard, and that is the Abjuration Wizard subclass. So how this works is you get the Arcane Ward feature, which has a poorly written tooltip that doesn't actually tell you what it does. What this does is, when you cast an Abjuration School spell, you gain a number of Arcane Ward charges equal to the level of that spell. So you cast a level 1 spell, you gain 1 Arcane Ward charge, up to a maximum of double your Wizard level. So currently, this can be up to 4. Every time you get hit, it reduces the amount of damage you take by that amount, the amount of the charges. So if we had 4 charges, we would be reducing all incoming damage by 4. This stacks with itself extremely powerfully, to the point where it reduces damage a ton. Then, after you take a point of damage, you lose 1 charge, but only 1 charge, and you can replenish those charges by continuing to cast more Abjuration spells. So, of course, we're going to make sure we have access to as many different Abjuration spells as possible, although at this point we've already got all the spells we need, so just take kind of whatever you want. At level 3, you can now learn level 2 spells from leveling up, but we actually have access to level 3 spells because we're now a 5th level spellcaster. And the only Abjuration spell at level 2 is Arcane Lock, but Arcane Lock is kind of fun because you can spam it on chests out of combat to boost your Arcane Ward. So we'll definitely want access to that. And then there's a couple defensive spells that are really good at level 2 in Blur and Mirror Image, both extremely powerful defensive spells that we could have running during fights. Mirror Image especially is good because it doesn't require concentration. Misty Step, of course, is great to have even though we already have access to it. And then, obviously, utility spells like Invisibility and Knock can be very useful as well. This is going to depend, again, on which scrolls you've found, but focus on spells that buff you or provide an option that doesn't require an enemy to make a save, rather than ones like Melf's Acid Arrow, which allows a save or requires a to-hit roll. Or like Scorching Ray, for example. So, definitely Misty Step, I think, is the best one, but it's going to depend on what scrolls you've found. We now get another feat, and here we are going to take... Here we actually have a couple choices. Great Weapon Master is great if you are soloing. Highly recommend this one. Although, if you're soloing, I think the best choice is actually Alert, because winning initiative is so powerful, and this character is going to have poor initiative thanks to your relatively low dexterity. Another option is in a party to take Sentinel, which is probably the best feat for melee characters to have in a party. Since we will be so tanky and able to lock down enemies so well, Sentinel will keep them next to us and prevent them from harming our allies. So for a solo character, I would take Alert. For a non-solo character, I would take Sentinel. Then, of course, you just pick whatever cantrip and whatever level 2 spells that you haven't found that you think you might want. Continue to level up. Now we can learn level 3 spells, but we can actually learn from scrolls level 4 spells, so keep that in mind. At level 3, by far the most important 2 spells to have access to are Haste and Counterspell. Counterspell is an Abjuration spell as well, so that will boost your Arcane Ward, and also gives you a tremendous amount of utility with your reactions in fights. Between Counterspell and Shield, you have the 2 best and most important defensive reactions in fights, so your reaction on this character is going to be incredibly valuable. And then Haste, of course, increases your damage output enormously, as well as increasing your AC, which will already be quite good, thanks to your shield, thanks to your just being in full plate all the time. And then the other one that you want to grab is either Protection from Energy or Glyph of Warding. These are Abjuration spells you can spam outside of combat to build up your Arcane Ward. And then finally, at level 6, we get Projected Ward, which is fine. It allows you to reduce damage to an ally. My advice is don't use this unless the ally is in some real trouble, but the thing that's really nice about Projected Ward is just that about this is that we are buffing our damage reduction to 12. You could go to 7 Wizard and 5 Fighter and still have the same spellcasting level and still have extra attack. You'd be giving up 1 feat, and I think that you will typically, unless you are going to use items to increase your attributes, which I'll talk about in a second, not want to do that. But if you are going to do that, then you're better off with 5 Fighter, 7 Wizard as your final build. And then, of course, we're just going to select whatever important spells we have not taken yet. But notice that we have access to up to level 4 spells here because of our total caster level, and so we can learn a level 4 spell. One that I quite like to have access to is Fire Shield, because we're going to be mixing it up in melee a lot, maybe taking some hits, so this increases our damage significantly, so we can learn that. And then we can cast it. Alright, I need to prepare it before I can cast it. Have to go here to prepare your spells as well, so make sure that you have all the ones that are really important prepared. Something along these lines. Oh, we probably want... I didn't level up Protection from Evil and Good. I took it as a fighter spell, so we have access to that as well, but make sure that you've got that. And then outside of combat, we can cast... When we can cast something like Protection from Energy. Notice that we have 2 points in Arcane Ward already, so you can just spam this on yourself, spending our level 3 spell slots. I meant to spend a level 3, not a level 4 there, but you get the idea. As long as we cast an Abjuration spell outside of combat, we can boost our Arcane Ward up to 12. We also have 3 points of Arcane Recovery, so we can get back one of those level 3 spell slots that we spent. And that can then be spent on Haste going into combat. Our level 4 spell slot can be spent on Fire Shield, allowing us to do damage while hasted, and because this doesn't require concentration, we can do damage while concentrating on another spell, such as Haste. Once we have Haste active and are wearing full plate, we should have 20 AC at base, 18 from the plate, and that's completely non-magical plate, 18 from the plate, and then 2 from the Haste, and then an additional 5 from a level 1 shield spell, although you can also upcast shield for even more AC, and then we will be returning damage with Fire Shield. So let's put this all together. So Let me cast Fire Shield, and then I'm going to cast Haste on myself.
Every kicked buttock, another step on the path.
And then I'm going to grab Minx here, who's built with my Minx build from a previous build guide. If you haven't seen that one, check it out. But this is one of the highest damage builds in the game, hitting for an incredible amount of damage every attack. And with a critical hit, we only took 23 damage, and succeeded on our concentration saving throw on Haste, because the damage was reduced. Minx took 22 damage back, because of the Fire Shield damage, so they went even on damage, and Lae'zel reduced the damage thanks to Arcane Ward. We now still have 11 points of Arcane Ward remaining, and that's only because that actually hit. Many times you're going to be able to prevent that attack from going off. I like that Minx is just walking away, even though the game is paused. He's like, I don't want any of this. Stop using me to demo this. Many times you'll be able to block that attack using shield, thanks to your very high AC. I also want to quickly talk about two kinds of items that can be very useful to increase this build, maybe get up to 14 points of Arcane Ward, and of course the more you stack that, since it reduces every attack, it multiplies with itself to become more powerful. And so if we don't need to spend points on strength, we can give up 1 feat. Or don't need to spend points on intelligence, we can give up 1 feat. And you can do that using Elixirs of Hill Giant Strength, which you get in Act 1, so if we were to take one of these every day, then we don't need to level up our strength at all, and in fact can start with 8 strength, maybe have some of these other attributes higher, and the Warped Headband of Intellect, which you get a little later in Act 1, can be used to set your intelligence to 17, which means that we wouldn't have to put 14 into intelligence, which doesn't save us a feat, but does allow us to make a slightly better stat spread overall. The best version of this build is going to be chugging elixirs all the time, but I don't like to recommend doing that because I think it's a little cheesy, so I prefer the one that gets the feat. This build also, of course, attacks twice every round, plus has action surge. You can haste yourself for a third action, and you will probably want to haste yourself in most fights, and in the really dangerous fights, of course, you can use haste and fire shield. Alright, my friends, I hope that you have enjoyed this look at this Eldritch Knight. It is extremely tanky, great at locking down enemies, I think a great fit for Lae'zel in terms of character, also quite mobile thanks to Expeditious Retreat, Misty Step, Haste, and the natural Githyanki mobility, and very high damage output thanks to Great Weapon Master, 20 strength, and Lae'zel's unique weapon access, which gives her access to some of the best two-handed weapons in the game. Alright, my friends, thanks so much for watching, and if you've enjoyed this look at the Eldritch Knight, then definitely please take time to hit like, leave a comment. I appreciate that very much, and it helps with the algorithm. And you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game content. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.